Hi everyone, it's Victor here, Fantasy Hockey Life. Just wanted to make a quick video to explain our cool Fantasy Hockey Life player cards. Well, I think they're cool. Hopefully you think they're cool. You may have seen them, but sometimes it isn't always 100% clear what's going on. So just wanted to do a little bit of that. So I'm gonna show you what they look like. These are available on our website, only to Ultra Lifers, Patreon members. What's really cool about them, I think, a couple things. We're looking obviously at Alexander Nikishin. This happens to be the default one that shows up when you search. But there's a lot of cool things that you can see. The obviously name of the player, the team that drafted him, the position is all right there. It tells you the current league that they're in, as well as the draft pick. That's all kind of at the top. There are cards for players who have played in different leagues, especially those who played in like world championships or maybe split their time between AHL, junior leagues, things like that, U20 versions of the same league. There will probably be a different card for each one of those. But for someone like Nikishin who's played the whole season, it's just one card. So what you can see here at the bottom are a bunch of different lines that are all these are based on rate stats, and we feel that rate stats are really important because you could look at a player who has very strong or very weak production, and you might get a not a clear idea of what their actual impression is because they might be getting either too much or too little ice time. So the per 60 really kind of normalizes that. You can see here, these bar graphs are based on a standard deviation. So based on the league that the player is in, how good is each one of these categories relative to the rest of the league? And you can see for Nikishin, 10 out of 10, no one is better statistically, at least from a standard deviation, in terms of defenseman goals. That's what that tells you. It doesn't tell you his projection or what this is going to be in the NHL. It's just a reflection of what's actually happening in that league at this time that we're looking at it. Assists, obviously very high, obviously. Minor penalties, that's what that stands for, MNP. We view minor penalties as a bad thing. So if they have a lot of minor penalties, this is going to be higher. If they don't take a lot of penalties, this will be, if they take a lot of penalties, this will be low. That's a bad thing. 10 is the best, one is not good. So if they don't take a lot of penalties, like zero penalties, they'd be 10 out of 10. So Nikishin doesn't take too many, but it's kind of average, close to average. Shots on goal per 60, he does shoot a lot, so 9. And then hits per 60, you can see off the charts. Now, this isn't going to give you a raw number, but it is going to give you a percentile. So you can see, if you're wondering, does he hit a lot? Yes, he hits a lot. This is something that's really hard to find. Peripheral coverage for prospects outside of the NHL is really difficult to find. So this is helpful. You can see both his hits, his shots, and even his blocks are pretty good. I mean, maybe not elite, but 7 out of 10 is still pretty good. This average bar tells you kind of the average of these previous ones. So across all of these categories, he comes out to be a 9. And then the points is obviously just the point categories, and the bash is just the block shots and hits. So these last three are just sort of summative of what's going on. The last one and the kind of secret sauce here is this in the middle part. And this kind of tells you where I have them ranked. So I do my own rankings. They are kind of behind the paywall here, but you can see where they rank out of 10. So 10 is the highest. Nikishin is one of the best prospect defensemen outside of the NHL currently, and that is reflected currently in his score. So that's really high. We could look at some other defensemen just as a comparison, and we could bring up the list here. We could look at somebody like Brant Clark, and you're going to see that there's a bunch of different leagues here. So we're going to pick Ontario of the AHL. And we're going to see that Clark is different, right? So goals and assists, super high. That's why his points are high, 10 out of 10. The shots are high, but the hits are not really there. The blocks are decent. So his bash is a little bit lower, but it actually says 9, but you can see that most of that is really driven by the high shot volume and the decent blocks, not much of a hitter. The minor penalties is a little bit low because he takes a little bit more penalties. And this averages out to a 9. So that's not bad. We could also look at someone like Jeremy Poirier, who didn't play a full season, but has some interesting stats. So you can see here that his scoring is really high. It doesn't take a lot of penalties, but his perfs are really not there. His hits are really low. His blocks are non-existent. So points only kind of an option, and I have him rated as a 7. So you get this impression, you can see very clearly who is kind of going to be great for the peripherals and who might be a points only kind of option. We only looked at defensemen so far, but obviously you could look at forwards and, there's some um, interesting ones. As I'm recording this, Kasper Halttunen just had a massive game in the OHL finals, so I'll just pull him up as a forward so you can see the draft pick, the OHL, and you can see that he shoots and hits a ton, huge shots and hit totals. Blocks for a forward, obviously you wouldn't expect too much, but decent there. So his bash is really high, but he's also a good points option. I have him at only a 6, but there's still some decent upside there. So these are just a couple of examples. Um, Obviously, there's some other great ones. You can even look at draft eligible players. So someone like Macklin Celebrini, obviously, we're gonna see a really high projection here, 10 out of 10. But you can see that if you're wondering, does he hit and block a lot? Not that it probably matters too much for him, but those are not as high. Um, we could look at maybe some of the Boston College kids, maybe someone like Ryan Leonard. And you can see there's a bit difference there. 10 out of 10 for blocks, 10 out of 10 for shots. So his bash looks good for those two. Not a lot of minor penalties, or actually a lot of minor penalties. That's why this is so low. The blocks aren't so good. So if you're in a PIMS league, you need to flip your thinking on this because you're going to want this to be low. And I have him at an 8. So those are the skaters. I just wanted to briefly mention also that we do goalies. So if you want to look at goalies, you can see Wallstedt is who I default to. That's my number 1 goalie. Some interesting things here. Obviously, the same thing across the top: name, position, league that he played in, and then draft position. This is my private ranking. And then these are just reflections of what's happening in the league. Saves per 60, does he get a lot of saves? GAA per 60, or goals against per 60, sorry. So this is more a reflection of what's happening with the team. This is really interesting. The passes per 60 is how much does he play the puck? You can see that Wallstedt is not a big puck mover, and that's reflected in this bar. We'll see another example where he is. Save percentage is really one of the main things that the goalies can control. So nice to see this be really high. And then the expected a goal per goal against is probably one of the most important ones because that's how good he is with respect to the difficulty of shots that he's getting. So you obviously want this to be high. You want the save percentage to be high. We can compare this to someone like Yaroslav Askarov, who very much loves to play the puck. You can see that here, 10 out of 10. Loves to play the puck. Some of the other numbers are maybe not as good. The save percentage is still good, but the expected goal per goal against not as much. So, maybe there's a little bit more team effect happening here. You can see that from the goals against, and you can see my ranking here. So those are kind of a little example of the skater and the goalie cards. Hope that was interesting. If you want access to these, you can become a member, patreon.com/fantasyhockeylife. And even if you want to just do it for a month, you can sign up for a month, you can have access, and then you can stop when you're done. And, you could do a month of draft prep and use it for a month, and then it would go away. But, appreciate any support. It obviously takes a lot of money and effort to put all these together. But we're trying to do a service out there for everyone, and I find them useful personally because I use them for my own prep and my own podcast prep and articles and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully you find it useful too. I know a lot of this information is hard to find, and that's why I wanted to do this, so I could make sure that we had access to it. Thanks so much. Appreciate all the support, and keep living that fantasy hockey life.